This period marked a shift from a closed state case to one under active federal consideration, raising community expectations that new information or evidence could potentially alter the official account. By 2015, Kendrick Johnson's parents took their fight for answers into the civil courts. They filed a wrongful death lawsuit in Georgia seeking $100 million in damages. The complaint named several individuals and agencies, including local law enforcement and school officials. In their filing, they alleged that certain people had caused Kendrick's death, and that others had engaged in a coordinated effort to conceal the true circumstances. One of the central points in their lawsuit involved the security camera recordings from Lowndes High School. The family claimed that portions of the footage were missing or had been altered. The publicly available videos showed Kendrick entering the old gym before his death, but not the events that followed. Large gaps in the timeline fed suspicions about whether all the recordings had been preserved and released in their original form. The lawsuit also questioned the thoroughness of the state's investigation. It argued that important witnesses had not been interviewed and that potentially valuable physical evidence had been mishandled or ignored. As the case proceeded, defense attorneys challenged the claims on procedural grounds. They argued that some of the named agencies could not be sued under Georgia law and that the family's complaint did not properly identify individuals in their official capacities. These arguments led to parts of the case being dismissed. Facing mounting legal expenses, the Johnsons eventually withdrew the lawsuit. The court later ordered them to pay significant legal fees to some of the defendants, adding financial strain to their already lengthy battle. Despite its end in court, the lawsuit kept public attention on the case, ensuring that questions about the missing surveillance footage and the initial investigation's scope remained part of the public conversation. June 2016, the U.S. Department of Justice announced the closure of its review into the death of Kendrick Johnson. Federal prosecutors stated that after examining the available materials, including state investigative files, medical findings, and interviews, they did not find sufficient evidence to pursue criminal charges under federal law. The DOJ explained that to proceed with a prosecution, the evidence must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and also meet the specific elements of applicable statutes. In this case, they determined those standards were not met. As a result, no one was charged, and the federal case was formally ended. This decision effectively reaffirmed the original Georgia Bureau of Investigation conclusion of accidental death. It also meant that the official cause, positional asphyxia, remained on the death certificate. For Kendrick's family, this was another setback. They publicly expressed disappointment, arguing that key findings from the independent autopsy had not been fully addressed. The closure left them without a criminal case at either the state or federal level, and without a path to force changes to the official record. With both the state and federal agencies standing by the accident ruling, the case returned to a status where further action could only come from new evidence, civil litigation, or another formal reopening of the investigation. In March 2021, Lowndes County Sheriff Ashley Polk announced that he was reopening the investigation into Kendrick Johnson's death. This decision came after years of community pressure, renewed interest from the public, and the Johnson family's continued calls for a new review of the evidence. Sheriff Polk stated that he had obtained boxes of files from federal authorities containing records from their earlier investigation. He explained that the goal was to re-examine every piece of available information to determine whether anything had been overlooked. As part of the reopening, Polk offered a $500,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of any person found responsible for Kendrick's death. This was intended to encourage individuals with possible knowledge of the events to come forward. During the review, the sheriff's team looked at photographs, autopsy reports, witness interviews, and school surveillance video. They also revisited the conclusions of both the state's and the independent autopsies. After completing the re-examination, Sheriff Polk announced in January 2022 that his findings aligned with the original state investigation. He concluded there was no evidence of foul play and reaffirmed that the death was accidental. The case was once again closed at the county level. January 10, 2025 marked 12 years since Kendrick Johnson's death. On that date, his mother, Jacqueline Johnson, spoke publicly about her family's ongoing search for answers. She expressed that the official account of how her son died still did not match what she believed the evidence showed. Jacqueline pointed again to the independent autopsy's conclusion, which noted blunt force trauma to Kendrick's neck. She emphasized that this injury could not be explained by the positional asphyxia finding listed on the state death certificate. She also raised concerns about the handling of Kendrick's remains. During the second autopsy, the family discovered that some internal organs were missing. Those organs had not been returned to the body after the state's autopsy, and their whereabouts were not documented in a way that satisfied the family's questions. Her statement renewed public discussion of the case. It was covered by local and national media outlets, which revisited the timeline and legal history leading up to the anniversary. For the Johnson family, the day underscored both the passage of time and their determination to keep challenging the official cause of death. On February 21, 2025, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit issued a decision in the Johnson family's ongoing legal battle. The appeal focused on the earlier dismissal of their civil lawsuit related to Kendrick Johnson's death. The appellate judges reviewed the district court's reasoning and agreed with some parts while rejecting others. They upheld certain findings, such as the dismissal of claims against entities that cannot be sued under the law, but they also determined that other issues should be reconsidered. Specifically, the court found that the case had been dismissed in part because of technical mistakes in naming defendants. The Johnsons had listed agencies, such as the sheriff's office or school board, instead of naming the individuals or legal entities in the proper capacity. The appellate court ruled that this type of procedural error could be corrected. It directed the lower court to allow the family to amend their complaint and substitute the appropriate parties. This ruling did not determine the merits of the case or confirm any of the family's claims. Instead, it provided a pathway for them to continue pursuing their lawsuit, as long as the necessary corrections were made. On July 25, 2025, Kendrick Johnson's parents filed an amended complaint in federal court in Atlanta. This updated filing named the Georgia Department of Public Health as a defendant and directly challenged the accuracy of the death certificate. The amended lawsuit alleged that the official cause of death, accidental positional asphyxia, was wrong and unsupported by the available evidence. The Johnsons claimed that the state's refusal to change this record violated their constitutional rights under the 14th Amendment, as well as protections outlined in the Civil Rights Act of 1871. In support of their claim, the family cited the independent autopsy's findings, including signs of blunt force trauma and a collapsed carotid artery. They also pointed to the unresolved matter of Kendrick's missing internal organs, which were not present when his body was returned after the state autopsy. According to the lawsuit, these organs were never properly accounted for, and this omission represented a serious breach in the handling of remains. The Johnsons sought $6 million in compensatory damages, $6 million in punitive damages, in order to correct the death certificate, and the right to present their case before a jury. The filing reflected their continued position that the official record did not reflect what truly happened and that the state had failed in its duty to ensure accuracy and accountability. On July 28, 2025, multiple Georgia news outlets reported on the Johnson family's amended lawsuit. Coverage highlighted the central claim that the Georgia Department of Public Health had maintained an inaccurate death certificate for more than a decade, despite evidence the family says contradicts the accidental death ruling. Journalists summarized the lawsuit's main points: the independent autopsy's blunt force trauma findings, the collapsed carotid artery, and the unresolved issue of Kendrick's missing organs. Reports also noted that the family's legal action accuses the department of violating federal civil rights protections by refusing to amend the cause of death. Some outlets revisited the history of the case, offering timelines that stretched from the January 2013 discovery through the earlier lawsuits, the 2021 reopening, and the appeals court's February 2025 ruling. The renewed media attention placed the case back into public discussion, prompting debates on investigative transparency, evidence handling, and the broader implications for other disputed death investigations. As of August 2025, the amended lawsuit filed by Kendrick Johnson's parents remains active in federal court. The case is in its early procedural stages, with the court expected to review the claims, the named defendants, and the requested remedies. If allowed to move forward, it could enter a discovery phase where both sides would exchange documents, conduct depositions, and bring in expert witnesses. The legal questions now focus on whether the Georgia Department of Public Health had an obligation to amend Kendrick's death certificate when presented with new evidence, and whether its refusal to do so violated the family's rights under federal law. The case may also test broader interpretations of the Civil Rights Act of 1871 and the 14th Amendment in matters involving official death records. For the Johnson family, the lawsuit is more than a legal proceeding. It is a continuation of a 12-year effort to change the official narrative of how their son died. For supporters, it represents an example of persistence in the face of repeated institutional conclusions that have gone unaltered for over a decade. Beyond this single case, the situation has prompted discussions about how disputed deaths are investigated, how forensic findings are handled, and how families can challenge official determinations. Advocacy groups and legal analysts note that the outcome could influence future cases involving contested causes of death, particularly where independent medical examinations conflict with state findings. While the court process may take months or even years, the Kendrick Johnson case continues to be a touchpoint for debates about transparency, accountability, and trust in investigative and medical reporting systems. The next steps will depend on how the court addresses the amended complaint and whether new evidence emerges during litigation.